Welcome to this session at HNPW entitled Takaaya, How Community Kitchens Offer a Local Lifeline to Sudan's Hunger Crisis. I welcome you all to this session. Questions will be taken at the end of the session, so if you have any questions for us in the room, please do raise your hand at the end. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. That would be absolutely wonderful, so we know that a number of people who are coming and who are from various geographical locations. Let me introduce you to the speakers. We have Shahab Muhammad Ali, Senior Programs Manager at Islamic Relief Sudan. Dr. Faiza Al-Hijzi from Islamic Relief Worldwide. She's a member of trustees. Fayha Maqbool, a committee member and a volunteer at the soup kitchens in Sudan. Myself, I'm the head of advocacy at Islamic Relief Worldwide, and I'll be moderating this session. And we have Chevelle Oz, a research and project coordinator at Islamic Relief. This session aims to expose the realities in Sudan and on the ground, where famine-level conditions and escalating violence are unfolding amid the near collapse of formal humanitarian systems. The session also aims to showcase the extraordinary leadership of local people and how community kitchens like Takaaya and emergency response rooms as a primary lifelines sustaining communities under fire. The third we wanted to highlight was the diaspora impact, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Faiza, who will talk about the critical role of Sudanese diaspora in keeping these grassroots systems alive through funding, through coordination, through advocacy. And finally, we're going to examine why international humanitarian actors have struggled to meet the needs and identify what structural barriers continue to prevent timely, flexible, and locally driven support. These initiatives demonstrate humanitarianism in its purest forms: neighbors protecting neighbors, communities organizing to save lives, and the diaspora sustaining hope across borders. And of course, as you know, we need to all understand that the fiscal challenges that Sudan continues to experience are driven by the ongoing crisis. Inflation in 2023 was 77%, which reached over 200% in 2024. Before we begin, we'll play a short video as an introduction.
What if I told you millions of people are being kept alive by something you have never heard of? Takaayas, which are community kitchens in Sudan run by local heroes, are feeding millions while the world ignores them. They are the only thing standing between families and starvation. But here is the problem. Funding is gone. Kitchens are shutting down. This is not a distant crisis. It is happening today. We can watch them close, or we can act.
Thank you so much for the video. I will pass it on to Chevelle Oz, who will present the report's finding. Chevelle is Islamic Relief's research and project coordinator.
Thank you, Shaheen, for the introduction. A huge welcome to everyone. Thank you all for joining. As we've seen in the video, last year at Islamic Relief, we conducted on-the-ground research in Sudan with the support of our country team. Our aim with this research was to better understand the role of grassroots networks in addressing worsening food insecurity and famine risk. And what we found was both devastating, but also deeply instructive. So I would like to share some of those insights with you today. Unfortunately, it does not do it justice to describe the situation in Sudan as critical. The statistics speak for themselves. Today, 21.2 million people are facing food shortages. In a survey of 585 households, we found that 83% of families reported that they do not have enough food to meet their basic needs. More than half said that their food stocks would not last beyond 1 week, and a large proportion recorded poor or borderline food consumption scores. These figures signal far more than shortages. They point to deepening vulnerability, harmful coping strategies, protection risks, and the erosion of community resilience. They concern us not only in our professional capacities as humanitarian actors, but also in our shared humanity. Yet among, what is now widely recognized as the world's largest humanitarian crisis, there's also another story that we would like to highlight, one of dignity, resilience, and innovation. Could I have the next slide, please? Networks of community kitchens, which you've seen in the video, known as Takaaya, have emerged as critical frontline responders across Sudan during the conflict. Where funding gaps, access constraints, and procedural requirements paralyze formal assistance, Taakaya have been feeding thousands of families each and every day. Led under the umbrella of emergency response rooms, these grassroots initiatives are funded largely through the Sudanese diaspora networks and sustained by volunteers who often themselves are living through displacement, insecurity, disease outbreaks, and economic collapse. The Taakaya draw on centuries-old Sudanese cultural traditions of mutual aid known as nafir, as well as the Islamic principles of charity, sadaqah, and zakat. Often based in community centers, mosques, or homes, they operate, with transparency, community accountability, and democratic decision-making. The informal and highly localized nature of the Taakaya mean that they are agile and adaptable. When cholera outbreaks make centralized food distribution unsafe, they shift to door-to-door delivery. When fuel is scarce, they adjust menus and sourcing strategies. So they have ways of getting around challenges in a way that formal structures cannot do. They're also cost effective. The cost per meal ranges, depending on the location, ranges between approximately 1.5 and 3.38 GBP, demonstrating a level of efficiency that warrants attention in today's constrained global funding environments. And most importantly, these kitchens offer something more than foods. They provide a response for the community, by the community, preserving social cohesion at a time when the social fabric is under immense strain. And crucially, the grassroots nature of these kitchens does not equate to limited capacity. Our research has identified hundreds of Takaaya operating daily across the country, with many coordinating locally, sharing information, and functioning with clear community oversight. In multiple locations, they've expanded beyond food provision to include basic health supports, informal education for children, hygiene kit distribution, and assistance for people with disabilities and others with specific needs. In other words, these are not simply kitchens. They are living examples of the localization agenda long championed under frameworks such as the Great Grand Bargain and broader UN reform commitments to shift power and resources to local actors. Sudan's Taakaya represent localization not just as policy language, but as an operational reality. Could I have the next slide, please? Despite this central role, many Taakaya are now closing or reducing operations, as recent data that we've uncovered shows. This is partially due to reduced demand in some areas as internally displaced people return to areas of relative safety. However, it is also driven by unpredictable and uneven funding flows, which make it difficult for kitchens to operate consistently from month to month. This means not only stopping operations, but also reducing quantity and quality of services, going from 3 meals a day to 1 meal and so on. Ensuring that the Taakaya can not only continue, but also build the capacity to provide more long-term services requires material and immediate action by the international community. This means providing flexible, direct, and accessible funding, fostering genuine partnerships that empower rather than instrumentalize local leadership, recognizing community-led responses within humanitarian coordination frameworks, and adapting aid modalities to strengthen rather than sideline local systems. I do not want to take up too much of your time, but I would like to share something that a Sudanese colleague reminded me of last week. When speaking of the closure of some of the kitchens, he said, Taakaya cannot die because the Taakaya concept is deeply rooted in the social context of Sudan. It never dies, and even if it diminishes, it rises again. And I believe that is the heart of this conversation. Community resilience in Sudan will endure. Informal mutual aid will continue to emerge. The question here is not whether or not Sudanese communities will act, because they already are. The real question is whether we, as the international humanitarian community, are prepared to act differently. If we do not support these locally led initiatives through flexible funding and meaningful partnership, we risk missing a critical opportunity to align our systems with a model of response that is dignified, community-led, cost-effective, and socially legitimate. Investing in Taakaya is not merely about financing food distribution. It's about reinforcing existing systems of solidarity. It's about strengthening food infrastructure and social infrastructure in a way that reduces protection risks, preserves dignity, and sustains cohesion under extreme stress. At this critical juncture, coordinated efforts are essential to prevent further suffering, not only in principle, but in practice. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I will hand over to my colleagues to discuss this in further detail. Over to you, Shaheen.
Thank you so much, Chevelle Oz. And as Chevelle quite rightly pointed out, the report findings, you can scan the Takaaya report here and you can download it too. You know, across the world, as Chevelle has spoken, we've seen, emergency response rooms are centralized to coordination hubs become the norm for crisis management. They're designed to accelerate aid and save lives, but in conflicts like Sudan's, these systems often cannot reach the people who need most help. Sieges, insecurity, bureaucratic delays, they all block aid, leaving communities to fend for themselves. In this context, Taakaya local community kitchens have become the frontline responders, feeding families daily in areas where international aid cannot reach safety. The next video we're going to introduce is one from Faiha. Faiha is our local individual who is a committee member and a volunteer at the soup kitchens in Sudan. She wanted to join us online today, but regrettably, Faiha is unable to join us online due to internet connections and security issues, but her bravery really does speak volumes. We share with you her words through video link it back to you. And I'll introduce you to Faiha, and she is a volunteer at Soup Kitchens in Shambat, and she will explain. And we've asked her a series of questions, and she's responding to those questions.
شنبات بها 40,000 نسمة، 70% منهم قادروا بسبب الحرب. منهم من هاجر إلى مدن الجوار والبعض الآخر إلى مدن السودان الآمنة. نجد أن الحرب دمرت كل شيء، كل شيء بكل ما تعنيه الكلمة. فليست هناك مستشفيات ولا صيدليات ولا حتى سوبر ماركت للعيش والخبز. الوضع الحالي الناس بدأت ترجع، ولكن ليس لديهم مصدر دخل. فالأسواق ضعيفة والأسعار باهظة، ولا يوجد أي دعم منذ اندلاع الحرب وحتى اليوم. فمنطقة شنبات من أكثر المناطق المحاصرة منذ بداية الحرب إلى ما قبل دخول الجيش السوداني بحره في 4 فبراير من العام الماضي. فمنذ بداية الحرب انشأت التكايا، فكانت التكية الأم أول تكية في شنبات منذ اندلاع الحرب. تلتها التكايا إلى أن وصلت إلى 15 تكية. فالتكية عبارة عن مطبخ جماعي أو مركز لتقديم الطعام للأسر والمحتاجين. هنا لا نقول الفقراء، لأن كثير من السودانيين بسبب الحرب فقدوا كل ما يملكون من مال. فمهمتنا هي تقديم وجبات للمتضررين، وتقديم مساعدات إنسانية، ودعم الأسر المحتاجة. فنحن نعمل بجد لإطعام أكبر عدد من الأسر أو أكبر عدد من الناس. وكل يوم نرى عائلات فقدت منازلها وأطفال يفتقدون الطعام. فنحن نحاول، مجرد محاولة، أن نقدم لهم ما نستطيع. ففي السودان التكايا بتساعد كثيرا في تخفيف الأزمات والمعاناة الإنسانية، خصوصا في ظل الظروف الصعبة وظروف الحرب. هناك بعض التكايا في شنبات توقفت عن العمل بسبب نقص التمويل، وهناك أسر معتمدة كليا على التكايا. كما نعلم أنهم غير قادرين على شراء احتياجاتهم بكل بساطة لأنهم متوقفين عن العمل بسبب الحرب. فإذا توقفت التكيان تزيد معاناتهم، وقد يؤدي ذلك إلى حدوث كارثة صحية أو مجاعة. فحاليا التكايا مدعومة من أبنائنا الموجودين خارج السودان والتجار في مدن السودان الآمنة. نحن نعلم أنهم لديهم التزامات تجاه أسرهم، خصوصا أن الحرب امتدت. في بداية الحرب التكية بتقدم 3 وجبات، تقلصت إلى 2 وجبات حاليا. فالتكية عبارة عن شريان حياة في المجتمع، ووقفها قد يزود من الأزمة الإنسانية. لذلك فنحن نرحب بكل مساعدة، خاصة إذا كانت من فاعلين دوليين محترمين. بالتأكيد نحن سعداء بشراكتهم معنا. فالشراكة الحقيقية في وجهة نظري تكون مبنية على الاحترام المتبادل والشفافية، بمعنى يكون هناك فهم مشترك لأهدافنا واحتياجاتنا. نحن كعاملين إنسانيين نعاني كثيرا من الضغوط نفسها، لكن نجتهد في الاعتناء بسلامتي ورفاهي النفسية من خلال الحفاظ على تواصل مع عائلتي وأصدقائي والابتعاد عن الأخبار السيئة قدر الإمكان. نتحدث مع زملائي عن تجاربنا ومشاعرنا، فنحن ندعم بعضنا البعض، وهذا العمل ليس بالسهل، لكنه يعطينا أيضا شعور بالهدف والمعنى، ونحن نفعل هذا لأننا نعلم تماما أنه يحدث فرقا، فقوتنا الحقيقية مستمدة من إيماننا بهدفنا وهو مساعدة الناس. ربنا يعيننا على الاستمرارية ودعم الآخرين، ونتمنى سودان بكرة آمن مستقر مزدهر، وأكيد بكرة أحلى.
I believe Faiha is with us online. Faiha, if you want to say a couple of words and share your experiences. Don't know if Faiha can hear us. I will move on. So I wanted to introduce you to Brother Shahab Muhammad Ali, who is our Senior Programs Manager at Islamic Relief Sudan. Shahab, you sit between two worlds, local initiatives and the international humanitarian system. What support is pledged and where does it get stuck? And what's actually blocking it from reaching communities? The floor is yours, Shahab. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thank you very much for this. Thank you for all. Ramadan Kareem. Actually, as you all know, the Takaya's concept is related to traditional, meaningful event that is related also to what we call Nafir. Nafir is working together to help people, and Takaya is a community kitchen that is working not only during emergencies, but also during these periods where people cook together for the needy people and provide food for the needy people. In the conflict that erupted in Sudan since 2023, it was spread all over Sudan in all areas except some areas in the north and in the east, and it affected all people. Some people were got hostage and under siege for long periods, and all their food consumed. There was no markets nearby, so people come together as youth and as community members to initiate this concept of Taakaya and to work and to provide food from different resources. Yes, the diaspora was mainly supporting these Taakayas, and also people from inside Sudan were contributing to these Taakayas. What is helped much is the mobile money transfer, because banks were not operational. There was cash liquidity already in the country, so people depend on mobile bank to transfer money either from outside Sudan or from inside Sudan, and then they buy and sell through this mobile money. There was many difficulties while people are fighting. While fighting is going on, you find those youth from the volunteers from different communities going to provide the food from nearby markets, and they used to be stopped at different checkpoints. Sometimes they were they were in a position to face difficulties. Sometimes they were detained. Sometimes their money taken, even their mobiles where they depend to put their money in taken. After they bring food, sometimes even the food itself, when they bring it on the way back, it is also taken. It's not only like that. They need water to cook this food, and they need to go for long distances up to the River Nile, for example, or up to some wells to bring water for cooking. And in these journeys, they also face difficulties. The commodities prices are very high, and they are very scarce. There is scarcity in markets, in commodities. They don't depend on one type of food. They are providing what is available in the market or what they can found. Anyhow, there was different obstacles to provide this support to the community. However, they continued, and even up to now, the Kias are working with different resources, minimal sometimes resources. There was very also reasons for the organizations working in this field to provide support. For example, if we can say the international community or the international organizations or even the national organizations, it was very difficult for them to adapt to the local situation and to regulate some rules by which they can provide support. This is related to many requirements of these organizations to provide fund. One of these are the due diligence and the screening, and they need a lot of paperwork, and that community is not used to. Those people are very active. They need to act. They need to receive and deliver in the same day even. So there was many regulations that they are not used to. There is issues of capacity. They are just active when there is an issue of like emergency. So there were many obstacles faced by those youth. However, their efforts continued, and even up to this moment, where when we are speaking now, these Takiyas are continuing in providing support to the needy people in different communities, not only in the areas facing conflict or areas under siege, but also in the areas where there is a little bit of safety and where displaced people fled to. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahab. And Shahab has outlined some of the confusions around bureaucratic impediments that slow down and complicate decisions when communities are required to be who want to act immediately, who want to be locally informed, use that action in order to be able to bypass bureaucratic barriers. And I guess part of that is the formal approvals that we have within the humanitarian aid system, which then requires, as Shahab was talking about, the risk assessments and the interdepartmental and organizational coordination and some of the legal reviews. And that's the other thing, as Shahab mentioned, that at a point where you see a humanitarian crisis, you are no longer following predefined procedures, or you need to, according to some of the issues that we've seen, it's not standard scenarios. So you're looking at local crises and you're offering a very unique solution to these spaces. We then follow up with Dr. Faiza, who is Islamic Relief Worldwide Member of Trustees. Dr. Faiza, that diaspora is often reduced to sending money home. What are Sudanese doing abroad actually keep Takaaya alive, and what would they need to do more effectively? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shaheen, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge some of the people who've put their names on the chat from different countries, and that's amazing. Ahmad, Somali Aid, Naziha, British Red Cross, Sarah, Shelter Box, UK, Rania, University of Khartoum. Rania, I also graduated from the University of Khartoum, so I wish we could go into a room and chat with each other. I'm on the other side of the world, here in Australia.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And it's
Hello,
11
from South
p.m. and somebody from South Africa. How awesome is that? Nora, Aya, Germany. Hi, Nora. And we've got someone from South Korea, Youngson. That's incredibly amazing. Francesco, from the mutual group, aid group. This is really fantastic. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate you giving time to come and hear us talking about Takaaya. So Takaaya is, it comes from, Takaaya is a plural word, and the singular is Takiya, and Takiya comes from the Arabic word of leaning in. So it's, it's exactly what's happening, community leaning in onto each other and supporting each other. And I'll just reflect on my own experience before I jump into what are the Sudanese diaspora doing, because it's important to understand the psychology and the mindset of the idea of a takiya or a takaya. When I reflect on my own experience being born in Khartoum, I became aware of takiya from a very young age. I have memories of myself going with my parents to visit the takiya to donate, and as a little girl, I was the one who was sometimes given some of the food items to go with my dad and donate to the takiya. And the key is, when I was young, were big communal kitchens linked to faith traditions, tariqa, and the Sufi tariqas in particular, linked to those ones. And there would be hundreds of people coming and eating. It's a truly communal soup kitchen where anyone can come, whether you're a traveler, whether you're sick, or whether you're just, poor. They are the community's way of preserving human dignity, so that people cannot, so people do not beg for food. That is seen as very shameful if someone has food and another person, a neighbor or someone is begging for food. So these are the principles as a Sudanese person that I grew up with. And from it comes the idea of nafir and sadaqah and all of that. And so when we travel abroad, when as Sudanese we become diaspora in other parts of the world, we continue that sense of giving. And that sense of giving is, the analogy is more like the ripples on water. It starts with your family, then your nuclear family, brothers, sisters, parents, then to the wider family, then to your tribe or community, then further and further and further down. And so when Sudanese go, as diaspora to the Middle East, the repatriation of their money back to their families before the war was a major contributor to the economy of the country, and basically enabled the country to continue ticking along economically, and for people not to fall into a famine. But with the war, the disruption, as Brother Shihab has said, the disruption of the economic system, the disruption of the flow of money, the insecurity, the displacement that has happened, made it very difficult to large numbers of people to continue that flow of money. However, communities started mobilizing. And I remember when my own family got displaced, I've got I've got two sisters and a brother who were in Khartoum, and two of them lived in neighborhoods that were under bombardment, so they had to flee. And they were telling me that people stopped them on the streets and offered them food. So, they would be in their cars, in convoys, fleeing, bombing, and local peoples from the villages would stand on the road, stop the cars, and offer people food. So, that is where the idea of Taakaya comes from. And for us as diaspora, and I live in Australia here, yesterday we had a Ramadan iftar where we collected funding. Doctors in Australia here have formed an organization so that they can collect funding and send it back to Sudan to provide medical aid. The week before that, there was another group that was also collecting funding to send it to support, you know, some of the local efforts that were happening. So this is part of the Sudanese psyche that operates informally outside of the aid system. And because we know how the system operates, we're supported by people internally who can tell us the banking system is not working. So you can use a Hawala system, or you can use local people that allow us, to send money, to be part of the response to supporting not just our nuclear family or our parents, but to support the wider community. So that is how, the system of the Taakaya works. It's more of a psychology of supporting each other. How can we work more effectively? I think that there is an opportunity for us as diasporas to consolidate our efforts, because we are more fragmented. So there is an opportunity for us to do that, but there is also an opportunity for us, I don't want to say to be recognized by humanitarian INGOs and the humanitarian system, because in what's happening in Sudan, the limitation of the aid money, from Sudan meant that diaspora's funding has become, the first aid of humanitarian that's reaching the country. So it would be useful if diasporas are also recognized as major frontline actors, especially in this situation, rather than just ad hoc supporters, because we are organizing ourselves, we are engaging in advocacy, we talk to our politicians most of the time to look into, political interventions, peace talks, support from the governments, and so on. I think that there are opportunities for the international NGOs when they are thinking of working in Sudan to engage with the diaspora in the co-design of how they can reach places that they normally cannot reach. And I think this is what Islamic Relief is doing. And I'll probably tell you a little bit more later on. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Faiza. And that brings me on to a very, very important point. Dr. Faiza spoke about the narrative of global aid. And we often speak about it in a formal system, which actually is not the whole picture. Last year, governments reported roughly around 220 to 250 billion in official ODA through the OECD system. Of that, only 20 to 25 billion was humanitarian aid. And this is the scale of the formal Western-led aid architecture. But Islamic philanthropy, for example, that Dr. Faiza was referring to, exceeds that alone. So, for example, zakat, which is given in the month of Ramadan, likely exceeds over 200 billion annually, which some institutional estimates placing the value between 400 million to 600 billion a year. And these figures come from development analyses linked to institutions such as the World Bank and regional UN bodies. So even if we take the lower end of that range, Islamic charitable giving is operating at a scale comparable to and possibly larger than any global government aid, which is what Dr. Pfizer was referring to. And if I just look at where I'm from the United Kingdom alone, British Muslims give approximately 2 billion per year in charity. And significantly, that is above the national per capita average. That is just one diaspora community. So what does this mean? It means that global humanitarian economy is not only state-driven, it's not only multilateral, and it's not only Western. And so there is a parallel, as Dr. Pfizer was speaking of, there is a parallel that exists, faith-based redistribution system operating at hundreds of billions of dollars annually. And I think what Takaaya talks to us about is that if we're really serious about humanitarian financing, sustainable development, and humanitarian responses, then ignoring the Islamic philanthropic flows is not just an oversight, it's a structural blind spot that we're all seeing, as to what Dr. Pfizer alluded to. And the question is no longer whether Muslim diaspora giving matters. The question is, why is our global financing architecture still treating it as a peripheral measure? So we're going to go back on to Shihab. Takaaya are keeping people alive with almost no formal funding. What would it actually take to resource them properly without bureaucratizing them to death? Over to you, Brother Shihab.
Yeah, actually,
I do apologize. Shihab is speaking from Sudan, and as you know, country
have
going through
the
crisis.
capacity to continue because they need recognition. They need recognition first from the local authority, local administration, and also from the international community, so that they can do their role, because they are near, they are grassroots, they are near to the community, they can do quick support and quick action. I remember 10 years or 11 years ago, there was floods in Khartoum. And a group of youth, they came together, they organized what called Nafir. Even they called their, if I can say organization or association, Nafir. And they managed from the first weeks to raise billions. That was not done by the local authority. And they started a response very quickly, reaching people everywhere. However, soonest they faced many problems. These bureaucratic problems or impediments here and there. And this reminded me when in the 17th century, when Murad was in Turkey, I think the Sultan Murad, someone tried to fly and he managed to fly. He was rewarded at the beginning. But then Sultan Murad said, if this guy can fly, what else he can do? And this is a problem of these groups of people under Nafir or Takiyas. They are not getting the support, not from the authority, minimal also from other international organizations, because of these different regulations and different policies. So I think what they need to continue is to be recognized, is to be organized, to raise their capacity, to try to organize them in groups, official groups, or even allow them to work under those associations that are already recognized, like, for example, the social clubs, the cultural associations in the community, and different forums that belongs to the community. So this is support they need in terms of capacity, in terms of recognition, so that they can continue and they don't die. Because as we said, this is not only related to emergency. They can work in recovering their communities and developing also their communities and they can help in building their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Shihab. I guess, colleagues, what this teaches us and what Shihab alluded to is he spoke about history. He spoke about history teaches us something very simple, but often forgotten. In every major crisis, it is faith communities or communities from those communities that have always been first responders. So long before the architecture of aid or modern humanitarianism, as we want to call it, before global coordination systems, before formal appeals, before international deployments, faith institutions were feeding the hungry, sheltering the displaced, and really caring for the sick. And in societies like Muslim societies, zakat and waqf and institutions, they funded hospitals, schools, public kitchens, and water systems centuries before the modern aid industry existed. And in Christian traditions, churches and monastic networks created systems of poor relief and community care that shaped early social welfare models. And what we see is across faith, across religious obligation, translated into that restructured redistribution. So these were not symbolic acts of charity, they were organized, they were sustained systems of social protection rooted in moral duty and community accountability. But then after the Second World War, the global humanitarian system itself formalized, and that response continues through, institutions like the United Nations, which brought it to scale. And I guess what Shahab has alluded to is, when interventions have struggled, it's often because they bypass these structures instead of working with them. So the lesson for us in history is not that we should romanticize faith-based response. It is that the resilience is strongest where community, where belief and responsibility are already intertwined. Back onto the next question for Dr. Faiza. We speak of what does it look like to keep families fed in a war zone? You've spoken about your own family, and what does it cost the people who are doing this work?
Thank you, Shaheen, and thank you for articulating the messages that we are trying to put across so clearly. Really appreciate that. Look, feeding families in a war zone is a very complex undertaking because in a war zone, people are displaced. The majority of people are displaced. There is no financial income for people, markets, and I went to Sudan in April last year. The markets are closed, so access to resources like fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, something like that is almost impossible because the whole value chain and supply chain of the food has been disrupted. There is insecurity. So even if there is a convoy of food coming that can be intercepted, diverted to another place and not allowed to reach. So people find it incredibly difficult. And again, from my own experience, one of my sisters decided to stay and not to leave the country. And so when I visited her in April last year, she was telling me how difficult it was for them to have 3 meals a day. So they've been living for the past 3 years on 1 meal a day. And for them to access legumes, because that is the only thing that can stay. There is no electricity, there is no water, as Brother Shihab has said. They buy legumes in quantity, and for them to buy the legumes, her son, and it has to be a man because there is gender violence. So her daughter has not left the house in the last 3 years. An adult daughter, just try to imagine that, has not left the house in the last 3 years because of the gender violence. If she walks down the road, she's subjected to gender violence. So her son wakes up in the morning does not take his phone, does not take the car, does not take money, walks for 10 kilometers, sometimes 15 kilometers until he finds a shop to buy legumes, and he cannot buy large quantities because taking these back home again, he could be intercepted, mugged, even killed. So he buys quantities that can keep the family going for, 2 weeks or something like that. And during the time that he leaves to the time that he comes back, it could be 5-6 hours where his family doesn't know if he's alive or dead. So this is what it takes to feed a family. Not every family has a son that can walk for 10, 15 kilometers or has, credit money that they can give someone to buy. For the majority of other families, they rely on the takia. And takias, it could be someone cooking lentil soup in big, huge pots and, giving it to people for free. People, again, use their own resources, resources that came from diaspora. It could be the local mosque, it could be a wealthy family, it could be somebody or a group of young people volunteering and setting up a soup kitchen in a school in the neighborhood. So this is how communities are fed. When I was there in April, we visited one of the takiyas in Shambat, and the man who was running that takiya was cooking under a tree. His shop was bombed, so he could no longer use the shop. So he was just cooking under a tree near his house using wood, just, from the neighborhood because he could no longer access coal fire or gas or any of that. And he was just, and he told me that he distributes around 300 meals a day. And on Friday, he distributes 2,000 meals. And people come to him from on a daily basis from a radius of 5 kilometers. And on Fridays, they come from a radius of 10 kilometers walking. They wake up in the morning, walk, come, fill their pots with lentil soup and return to their homes. So what we did as Islamic Relief, we entered into an agreement with him to supply him with canned meat from Qurbanis. So again, you talked about Islamic giving and the Qurban donations that we all donate to Islamic Relief and other Islamic organizations as part of that charitable faith-based giving is most of the time canned to preserve its life and then distributed to communities. And so we entered into a partnership with that man that we will supply him with canned meat so that he can improve the nutritious quality of the food that he is giving out for people. Islamic Relief could have set a takia, but that is not how we want to operate. We support the existing network of people by, entering into a relationship which does not require a lot of administration. There is no administration burden on the groups that we're working with, which is the point that Shihab has alluded to. It's because these takia, first of all, they are volunteers. They are using most of the time their own resources, sometimes at the expense of their own families. They are exposed to insecurities because they have to go get supplies. They stay in open public places while they're cooking, and they expose themselves where queues of people are waiting and they're providing that food to them. So they are putting themselves in danger as volunteers. They face violence, they can face attacks, and so on. And I think the mental health, the trauma that the people working in those Taakaya face on a daily basis, seeing young people who are hungry, children, women, single mothers. They hear the stories because they see the same groups of people on a daily basis. That also increases their emotional burden, especially when they find that, their resources are dwindling and they might have to close the Taakaya or reduce the number of meals that they are giving to people out. So there is a lot there, especially when we're talking about Taakaya, the cost of keeping a Taakaya alive and the cost of feeding people in war zone is quite significant. It's complex, and it requires flexible systems that are intent on keeping the Taakaya alive and not focusing on bureaucratic administrative processes.
Thank you, Dr. Faiza. And I just want to really pick up on some of the issues that you mentioned. You spoke about mental health. You spoke about sexual violence, which is rampant. We know that in the Kordofan region and also Darfur. And we've seen since the war in 2023, millions have been displaced. Markets, as you said, have collapsed. Entire neighborhoods in Khartoum, in Omdurman, and across Darfur have been cut off from very, very basic services. Before large-scale international access was negotiated, before any funding pledges were fully mobilized, Sudanese families abroad, like yours, Dr. Faiza, were already responding, whether you were in Riyadh, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in London, whether you're in Cairo, whether you're in Germany or in Toronto. They began to move that money immediately. And according to the World Bank, remittances to low and middle income countries globally exceeded 650 billion annually. And what we saw in fragile states, they often surpassed the official aid flows. And for Sudan, remittances have long been critical economic lifelines, even before the war. But in wartime, we're seeing that these changes from economic support to survival infrastructure, what does it look like? That looks like a brother in the Gulf sending funds through informal hawala networks, like you've just said, when the banking system collapses. It looks like the diaspora doctors that you spoke about, pooling money to support local emergency rooms with basic medicines when supply chains are blocked. And I've seen it from my side as well, where a group of Sudanese engineers have come together to see what they can do in order to be able to support Taakaya in Sudan. Again, it looks like extended families coordinating food purchases in Port Sudan for relatives displaced from Khartoum. And this is not theoretical solidarity. It is granular, it's immediate, and it's very personal. Very, very personal. So whilst we see that there's a formal humanitarian actors, including agencies like United Nations system, what we're seeing is how collectively enormous communities are coming together, and they come fast. So in many Sudanese households today, the first line of protection is not international food distribution, it's actually the relative abroad. How are they eating in Ramadan whilst I'm eating here? And I think it's all that where you're seeing diaspora financing. We misunderstand how people are surviving right now. And the lesson for Sudan is very, very clear to us. In war, communities do not wait to be rescued. They activate their own global networks, whether it was the Pakistan floods or whether it's Sudan at this moment. These networks are rooted in faith, in kinship and obligation. And many of us who are humanitarians, who are part of this call today, know that faith, that kinship, that obligation is feeding families every day through our own networks and our own systems. The next question I have is for Dr. Shihab, Brother Shihab. As a humanitarian aid worker, if international actors showed up tomorrow with funding, would the emergency response rooms or Taakaya even want it? And what do you think that genuine partnership would look like?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, of course, they want it. They need the support, they need the money. However, we need to have midway between the international community, international organizations, and these local initiatives because of there is difference. There is different maybe way of work. There is regulations. There is policies. There is a lot of things. We need to the international community and international organizations. They need to adapt their systems to such initiatives from the community because these initiatives are deeply rooted in the community and they are the ones who can make quick action. They can reach the needy people in different circumstances, in different ways, and they are just need to be recognized, to be organized. There is some like what I mentioned, some community institutional associations that are already recognized and doing either, for example, sports like football clubs or cultural activities. Like there is one institution in Shambat I know is called Anima. Anima is a type of tree. It's Anima Cultural Association, which is recognized, established, and registered with the government. And it's not only this. I know in all communities, even in the rural areas in other states, there are some associations that are registered within the, because they have policies, they have regulations, they have this and that. Those initiatives of Taakaya and Nafir can easily work under these associations and they can provide them some cover. Then they need from the international community to support them. They need support. I assume if any organization or any international organization or donor would like 0.5% less or more in the budget for supporting training and capacity building of such initiatives in terms of localization or in terms of any concept, that will benefit a lot because, as we said, Taakaya is not only related to emergency, it is related also to recovery of the community and developmental aspects of the community. So, or even contingency, a small contingency budget, so that these organizations can work freely with this initiative, with this use, with these good ideas, supporting them not only financial but also in terms of raising the capacity. So yes, I can say yes. These initiatives, they need a lot of support. They need money. It is only how can they receive their money or how can international community give this money. We need to come, and this is also responsibility of the local authority. It is their role to organize, to coordinate, and they need to come together and sit with both parties, those who are ready to help, to give, and those who are ready to take the responsibility and implement on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahab. And I think the concept of Nafir, which is a concept in Arabic of working together, really comes out here. You know, you're talking about partnerships, you're talking about what that means. It means rapid, flexible support in the language that we see from an advocacy perspective. What do we ask our government, or what do we ask of some of the asks that we ask when we're talking about Sudan? You know, funding must flow quickly to meet urgent needs, reflecting how Nafir operates. And Shahab spoke about it. He spoke about co-ownership with communities, diaspora, local communities, local committees and NGOs jointly deciding priorities. Dr. Faiza also spoke about support for protection, including GBV, you know, funds that back safe housing, medical care and psychosocial support, which she spoke about as well. And I think what's most interesting in this conversation is that integration of faith and humanitarian principles, and what does that actually mean in a crisis that is where you're not able to get your funds, but there is this whole system that is underpinning it. How do you channel through those structured partnerships? What respect would you have for the religious and humanitarian accountability in that space? And instead of replacing Nafir, donors and institutions can enhance its reach and sustainability. And I guess that's the point where Dr. Faiza we'll go into questions after this, but what we're saying is that the challenges that Sudanese diaspora members face in supporting local humanitarian responses, how can we overcome these barriers and how can we maximize the impact?
Look, that's a really important question, Shaheen. Thank you for it. Look, I mean, throughout the conversation, we spoke about a number of barriers, internally within Sudan that, are barriers for people who are responding, local response. We talked about the psychosocial burden, the emotional. I want to touch a little bit on the financial obstacles. So, and again, I use my own experience. So for me to send money to my family who are still in Sudan, there is no banking system. So what do I use? I use the Hawala system. And with the Hawala system, I lose 40 cents in every dollar I send. That is incredibly high as a percentage to lose. And that is the case with every other transaction that the diaspora are engaging in, where we're using, semi-formal, if we can say the Hawala is a semi-formal means of financial transfers. They drain the funds by the time they reach the other side. It's very difficult. So this to me is a major obstacle that we really need to talk about, consider ways. And one of the ways I think we can move forward by addressing these nuanced and complex barriers in Sudan and in any place where there is conflict is for the formal structures to work with the diaspora, because we have the intelligence. We get fresh information on a daily basis from our families, our friends, our relatives who are in the conflict zone. We know if the internet is working, we know if the banking system is working, we know if the supply chains are working or not, and what type of food they have access to, if the markets are there or not. So if we are, as diaspora, included in the coordination systems of the formal aid processes, and we are part of the co-design of responses that are happening, I think the formal aid processes can really benefit. There is an opportunity there for the formal aid processes to benefit from the intelligence that we can provide and from the practical knowledge and experience that we can bring. So to me, probably this is the framework or the approach I would use.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faiza. And Dr. Faiza makes a really valid point about for those of us who work in transferring aid funds, many of us know the bureaucratic impediments around it. Most of us know around the bank de-risking and the regulations around the way we transfer funds and all the different obstacles, because by the time you transfer something to Sudan, you would have gone through several channels. You would have gone through a British bank or an Italian bank, and each takes their cut. And by the time that the money gets to Sudan, it will be, so for example, if we send £1, by the time somebody in Sudan gets it, it'll be worth 30p. And I guess when you're looking at the Sudanese pound, which has completely collapsed in value due to the conflict, you're seeing people from Australia, like Dr. Faiza was saying, hold money in those foreign currencies, but money is sent through the Hawala, for example, which is stable at the beginning, but then you lose as the volatility creates a pressure on foreign currency reserves. So what you're seeing is these transfers, they affect that liquidity in donor countries through the forex system. And if However, if, as Dr. Faiza said, if multiple diaspora networks are sending money simultaneously, can it be done through the aid space? Even though the diaspora remittances are private, regulators track large outflows to prevent money laundering or destabilizing forex markets. And we know all this. And we know about the exchange rate instability in Sudan as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor for questions. So please do pop your questions in, and I would love for people to ask a question. And I know I know Rania Balila, you said that this session means a great deal to you emotionally, and you've been working on the resilience of Sudanese people. I wondered, would now be the time for you to intervene and say a couple of words?
Thank you very much for giving me the chance. I'm a Sudanese displaced researcher, so it touched me emotionally very much, I've been displaced internally as well, and Takaaya are the backbone of us in Sudan and of our families that we have left behind when we left the country. I had to leave the country because I needed medical surgery, an important one, so I had to leave. Takaaya needs to be funded, and Sudanese people are doing great. I'm proud. I'm Sudanese. Sorry to say this, but I'm really proud. I'm Sudanese because people support each other very strongly. Takaaya, Nafir, Shara al-Hawadis, different initiatives in Sudan that are taking place or took place in the past, and people are supporting each other. It doesn't have to do with tribes or ethnicity or religion or anything. So you will have a Taakaya that is led by a Christian person in Sudan. You will have a Taakaya that is led by a Muslim, or even people who are faithless. Let's say that. So it has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. It's a perfect support system. And yeah, just to say it again, I'm really happy that people are recognizing what's going on the ground. Thank you very much for giving me the chance. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Rania. Faiza, did you want to respond to Rania?
Look, just it's not easy, and I think the spirit of action, the humility by which the Takayas are happening is something that we really need to honor. And as somebody said here, you don't have to apologize for being proud to be a Sudanese. I get people saying to me when we are fundraising, so why should we donate to you? What's happening in Sudan is a civil war. You people need to sort yourselves out. But I think what you and I are talking about is focusing on the goodness, the cultural and faith-based values that hold us together as human beings, and that all of us in this call are motivated, inspired by, because our focus is a humanitarian rather than a political one. I am proud that we have a tradition like the Taakaya that is flexible, that is responsive, and that is keeping people alive, because that's really what matters at this point in time. Thank you, Rania.
Thank you, Faiza. And Shihab, did you want to come in and respond to Rania as well? I just wanted to say a majority of the Islamic Relief staff in Sudan are also displaced. Shihab, are you able to? You're muted. Oh, Shihab, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Sister Rania. That's good. We also been caught inside Khartoum when the war started, and we managed to escape or to flee, and we didn't know if we will reach a safer place or not with our families. And then we reached the second day, we reached to a safer area, which was Gadarif. Then we started thinking, how can we help? And then we recognize ourselves as displaced staff helping displaced people. It was very emotional also for all of us. Yes, many of us are separated now, are working while their families either refugees in other countries or displaced in other safest areas. However, it is deeply touching when you visit a displaced camp and see the women and children and elder people, those who are disabled, they are suffering a lot. They are just seeing and watching what's going to happen, not tomorrow, but not what's going to happen the next hour. They want to feel peace, to feel peace and feel freedom. It was very touching to see all of this. And when you come back after, for example, a distribution, you come very encouraged to continue because of this da'wat that you feel it is accepted even before you leave the area. We ask Allah to accept all good deeds and to provide safety and security to all people in Sudan and also to all people in the world. Thank you.
Amin. Thank you, Shihab. Thank you. And thank you for your intervention, Rania. It's a very emotional space to be in. We have another question from Soledad Muniz. I don't know, Soledad, if you want to unmute and ask the question yourself, or would you like to, or I can.
Yeah,
I
can. Thank you. You're so kind for giving the space. Well, first to say what I wrote there, that thank you so much for sharing your crucial work, because I think it's outstanding and many parts of the world could learn from the way that the response is happening in Sudan. I was lucky last year to be part of a consortium that was supporting strengthening the emergency response rooms, and they had asked us to provide some training on participatory storytelling. So I shared the video they created on the chat. But I was wondering if the system works in parallel of the community kitchens, or if it's part embedded inside the structure of the emergency response rooms. I just had that doubt because they also talk in that video many of the things that they support communities of the community kitchens. So that's why I was wondering if you could share a little bit more how it works.
Shihab, over to you.
Yes. Yeah, you know, the emergency response rooms are a little bit organized. They are the same people who are working in the Takiyas. They have some connections with each other. They manage to organize themselves. However, you will find many Takiyas. Let me tell you that in Shekan, in North Kordofan, there is 105 Takiyas, all working together. But they might not be part of this initiative or emergency response rooms, although they are doing the same and they are providing the same service. This is what I meant. We need recognition and reorganization and support in capacity building. And this could be done not only by the international organizations, but also the local authority has a role in organizing these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Shihab. Is that okay with you, Soledad?
Yes, I was gonna write in the chat to not continue after thinking, but absolutely, I think that's really helpful to understand that it's much more extended, the network of the Takayas, and that they do need the recognition. That's wonderful.
Faiza, did you want to come in, or?
Yeah, look, just on Soledad, emergency response rooms have Takiyas, but not all Takiyas are part of them. So that's the simple answer, because Takiyas are organic. They emerge as the need emerges, and then the emergency support rooms became organized and offered more than food. They offer other services as well. So in terms of Naziha's question, when receiving funds from international humanitarian actors, how do Taakaya ensure compliance with accountability principles? You know, this is a big question, but the important thing to understand that Taakayas are a very basic, flexible and responsive volunteer-based operation. So you can't hold it to the standards of a registered legal entity. Some of these Taakayas are not registered, they're not legal entities, they are community support mechanisms. And I can tell you, as I said at the beginning, Islamic Relief, when they work with Taakayas, they do not provide resources that require auditing and so on. They provide resources that can go straight into the work that the Taakaya is doing. So we provide qurbani meat, lentils, or something like that, that is used in the daily workings of the Taakaya, and we continue to build the relationship with them. As Brother Shihab has said, if the formal international system and the INGO want to continue to work with grassroots systems, then they need to invest in enabling these systems to become more organized in the same way that the emergency response rooms became more organized and were able to access international funding. But at the same time, being flexible enough, because again, the majority of the people working in these spaces are volunteers, not to hamstring them with the layers and layers of administration and red tape. That to me will kill the Taakayas if we put them in that space, and it might create a dependency that might erode the Nafir system, that social solidarity and mobilization. I worry about the dependency that might be created. So we need to co-design this approach with people in the community so that we're not depleting a system that has been in place for centuries.
Thank you, Dr. Faiza. I think more interestingly, we're now seeing so many different spaces in which Taakaya are landing, and we've seen in one of the chats they've spoken about it being in Uganda. We have it from a UK perspective as well, when communal kitchens come together to feed people during the cost of living crisis as well. Shihab, one final question I would like to ask is, you're often seen as providers of safety and support, even whilst you already explained you're living under huge pressure. The humanitarian aid community is living under humanitarian pressure. How do you care for your own well-being, and what helps you sustain your ability to continue to supporting others?
Yes, actually, what help us to sustain and to keep our strength while living in this difficult situation is the people we on daily basis see in the camps, the displaced people, those who are giving us the courage to continue our efforts and our work. It was very difficult for people who fled their areas. For example, Khartoum, we left everything. We just escaped with our souls. We went out alive. And we up to now, we could not go back even to Khartoum. But we are working together to provide the support needed. And again, those who are encouraging us are the people who are displaced the old woman, the old man, disabled person, a child, a woman. They are giving us strength and support to continue. We are living here together, which also help us to sustain as colleagues, as brothers. We are eating together. We are going in the evening playing football. We are going by the sea here in Port Sudan. We have a good cost. We try to communicate and keep in touch with ourselves. Also, the social media helps us a lot to keep in touch with our families, and this is released a lot of stress and tension from us. And we hope for the best, inshallah, when we'll be back to Khartoum. And we hope all the best for all the Sudanese. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahab. That's deeply reflective. And Dr. Faiza, I will ask you the same question, but from a diaspora, you not being able to see your family in Sudan, how you are also caring for your own well-being and what sustains you in helping continue to support others, and also being the distance between the two lands, how that helps you and how you are able to share your love with the people of Sudan in that sense.
Thank you so much for this. You know, I mean, I think we're lucky that we have social media. If this has happened 20 years ago, where we didn't have social media that allows us to be in touch with our families, at least to know that they are still alive. So it's that basic level that they are still alive, because people die on a daily basis. When the conflict was there, and there were internet blockouts, we could go for 2, 3, 4 days without knowing if our families are alive or dead. And that's not a space that I wish on anyone. And I just want to acknowledge that there are many other communities going through conflict, whether it's Gaza or whether it's the Gulf countries. What's happening regionally in the space is a cause for concern. As a humanitarian agency, we pick up the pieces after the guns have gone silent, and while the guns are blazing, we are the ones who pick up the pieces as humanitarian actors. And we know that the cost to civilians is very high, regardless of who wins and who loses. You know, I just hope that conflict would end, because Sudanese people want to go back. They want to resume their lives. They want to reboot and restart, because they have realized that even though they were living in one of the poorest countries in the world, that they were living with dignity. And once they became displaced, whether it's neighboring countries or in camps in the country, they felt that they have lost more than their homes. They've lost their dignity. They've lost their sense of identity, and that is very difficult. I think for some diaspora, there is that sense of guilt that we're living comfortable lives, while the rest of our families, our tribes, our communities are being displaced and are suffering. And we continue to advocate, because Sudan has been the silent, you know, the silent conflict that people pass by without acknowledging that it is happening, even sometimes without donating to causes in Sudan, because there are other larger conflicts that are happening. And the worst thing that can happen for us as human beings, that we start comparing, you know, calamities with each other and then decide who is worthy of our charitable donation or of our emotional support. That is something that I think we as Sudanese felt that we're carrying the burden of the conflict of our countries on our own. We didn't feel the support of the international community, and it felt lonely, it felt difficult, and we hope that people can recognize what is happening and that there are more concerted efforts to support Sudanese people to go back to the country that they love and that has a culture that is deeply rooted in concepts that are foundational to us as human beings. Thank you all very much. I just want to acknowledge a number of other people on the side. Rania for putting a link to the article on the Lancet, and many other people who put their names here. Thank you so much, and I hope that you found that this hour and a half was a useful time. Yeah, thank you very much for your interest